Okay, Rich, we're all set.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Ethics Advisory Board meeting for June 7th, 2022, and welcome everybody. I see we do have a request to speak, and I've received a blue card in accordance with our 3-minute privilege of the floor rules, and I'm inclined to allow that comment. The one issue I would just raise is that I'd asked to limit comment to process and not substance of what we might be talking about. Oh, wait, has Sharon Salimowitz arrived?
She's just coming, she's just joining us now.
I'm going to wait just a moment then. Let's get her in the room. We will. Okay. We're going to do introductions in just a minute.
Hello.
Hi, Sharon. Welcome.
Hey, Rick. Thank you.
I just called the meeting to order, and I was just speaking to a request for privilege of the floor, and I'm inclined to allow the statement to be made, but I would just ask that we try to limit comment to process and not substance at this point, because we have not considered substance, and as a group, we're trying to follow a procedure where we receive evidence before we try to draw any conclusions on it. With that said, Zach Wynn.
Good morning, my name is Zach Wynn. To your comment, I would hope that the reimagining public safety process that is now moving forward in the county as well as in the city at a more accelerated pace would slow down to the point of complete halt to forward progress until the issues surrounding reimagining public safety are sorted out. There's currently an attempt to implement some of the recommendations, specifically recommendation number 1 in the city, which has major implications for structure of the police department and could adversely affect the morale of the remaining police. And I believe the eagerness to continue forward is rooted in the desire to kind of preserve some of the progress that's been made. I'm of the belief that this entire process has been contaminated from its onset. And if there's going to be a remaking of law enforcement, I believe that process should start again from scratch in an open process that is not concealed from public scrutiny or interaction. I believe that doing all of this over Zoom over the past few years has been more of a mechanism to keep the public uninvolved than it was to protect people from COVID-19. So please take your time with this and examine all of the different aspects of how this came to be and how this process is now. I don't think you expected an ethics investigation when you voted for that. So with that said, I'm just going to leave you to the rest of your business. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And I'd like to proceed to introductions of the committee members, and maybe you just want to say who you are, and I don't know if you want to say where you live or why you're on the board, why you're interested. We can, we don't have to. Brian, why don't you lead us up?
Brian Eden. I've been on the board, I think, since 2009. I've been on a number of other boards in the county. I'm still on the Climate Sustainable Energy Advisory Board and a couple of other smaller ones. And, I retired from Cornell Law School in 2000. So I'm been fairly active in other committee groups. And, I'm happy to be part of this process and to be helpful, hopefully. Thank you.
Katie?
Sure.
Hi,
everyone.
Gretchen Raymarcha.
Gretchen. Oh,
That's okay.
backwards, sorry.
I don't know what this says. It might say.
No, it says Gretchen. I just have been talk.
I I've been on the board for a while, more than 6 years, I would say. I'm not sure exactly when I stepped on. I don't have it off the top of my head. I have a background in social work and teaching ethics, and I enjoy kind of figuring out these complicated puzzles.
Thank you. Now, Katie, sorry.
It's okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Walpole. Sorry, I couldn't join you in person today. I am a native of Groton. I recently moved back to the area in December after 7.5 years with Clark County, Nevada. It's the nation's 11th biggest county, doing administration, public policy, internal and external and legislative affairs. I'm now back in Groton, and I work for Syracuse University.
Okay, thank you. And Sharon? I think you're on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Sharon Salimowitz. I just joined the board, I believe, just a few months ago. I'm a local attorney in town. I've had an office for several years. I apologize for not being in person. Unfortunately, I just tested positive for COVID yesterday, so that's why I'm joining remotely. But that's who I am.
Well, thank you for attending remotely. I'm sorry that you have COVID, and I hope it's going okay.
So far, so good.
My name is Rich John. Actually, before I get there, I'd like to introduce Kathy Covert, who is our legislative clerk, and Katrina McCloy, who is also a legislative clerk, and they will be assisting the committee, the advisory board, and Paul Ferrara from Costello, Cooney, and Theron from Syracuse, who is serving as our counsel for our advisory board. We'll have access to counsel throughout our work. Any of you can ask for us to get help with any kind of legal question along the way. And Paul and his partner, John Lange, will be working on this matter for us. We also have the ability, of course, to go into executive session during our meetings if we needed to. I would advise that we want to use that as limitedly as possible, but we do have that right to do that. If you do have a legal question, as far as possible, I'd like us to address it in open meeting to the extent we can. And I also request that we try to do so together so that everybody stays on the same page as to the legal issues that we're facing. But we do have that access, and I want to make sure you know that. So these are the people who are here to help us. And I also wanted to take just a few minutes, and bear with me, to talk about what we're here to do. And I'll start with a few words about my role as chair. As a lawyer, I'm attuned to the idea of conflict of interest. And if this were a legal matter, I would be conflicted out, meaning I shouldn't participate. But as a local political actor, I know many of the people involved. I've worked with them, and I continue to do so and will continue to do so. And as chair of the Public Safety Committee, I've certainly weighed in on the reimagining public safety process and taken votes on this issue. So it seems strange that it's set up that I'm on this ethics advisory board, but the county ethics code essentially tracks New York state law creating ethics advisory boards. And New York state law requires that a member of the legislature serve. And if I stepped away, one of my colleagues would have to take my place. And all of my colleagues on the legislature, to a greater or lesser extent, all have the same problem of being involved in this issue. So a potential conflict of interest, it's not really potential, it exists. And in some sense, it's unavoidable. And I've thought about, why is it set up that way? Well, one reason I see is in the nature of what we're called to do. We can issue an advisory opinion, and it does not carry the force of law. We can't make any municipality do anything. Our opinion is an opinion. The city is clearly free to ignore our advisory opinion if we issue one. And so legal conflict is not the issue. But it still seems messy to me. And this leads me to the second reason why I think they want a legislator on the ethics advisory board, which is that this is inherently there's an inherent political nature to the Ethics Advisory Board. I think a political actor is included because we're asked to make what at heart are political recommendations about what we want our government to be and how government is supposed to work. And from that standpoint, having someone involved who has an understanding of governmental process does make some sense. And I would offer in my defense, I have some qualifications. I've practiced law for 30 some years. I'm in my 7th year on the legislature. I also served for a decade as a municipal attorney, and I've been responsible in the past to conduct investigations inside a large corporation I worked at. I also lecture on investigations at the Cornell Law School as part of a course that I teach up there. So I hope that my experience provides some positive benefit to our work, but in any event, I completely admit I carry my baggage with me, good and bad. So what can we do about that? Because the law says I have to be here. Well, I have a couple comments. I'd like us to proceed with as much transparency as possible. We'll need some opportunity to deliberate in private, I believe, but otherwise, to the maximum extent we can, I believe we should let the public see what we are doing. And we should try to proceed by consensus. The law setting up the Ethics Advisory Board says 4 votes are necessary for any action of the 5 of us. So clearly I can't act alone. Indeed, I can do nothing without you agreeing as well, at least 3 of you. And 4 of you could stop me from suggesting anything. I'm hoping that our decisions will be unanimous to the extent we can get there. And I hope we have good deliberations and reach consensus. But I think that's an important element. Finally, I suggest that each of you have a role to play. First, police me as chair. If you see me doing anything that suggests bias or favoritism, tell me. Or at least, if you're unsure, ask questions. I have thick skin and I want you to be comfortable with what we're doing here. And second, we all need to work, as the saying goes, without fear nor favor. And that's easy to say, but sometimes hard to do. We have to go where we have to go, I believe, if we're going to be effective. And I urge you to keep that directive in mind, that you just need to keep going. In that, we need to be patient. We need to please continue to avoid talking with outsiders about the substance of the complaint and try, to the extent you can, to avoid reaching conclusions. We will get there in time. But in the meantime, we need to, as a body, try really hard to follow process, try to pay no attention to anything that takes us away from the job at hand. And finally, I would like to talk about importance. An advisory opinion is advice, right? Perhaps unwanted or even unsolicited advice. But New York State law uses the word shall in the charge to the Ethics Advisory Board. In directing us to receive and consider this complaint or any other, we do not have discretion to look the other way. There is no city ethics advisory board, so it falls to us solely and alone to reach whatever decisions we end up making. And just like people, governments can be uncomfortable taking advice. And in fact, at the extreme end, authoritarian governments are really bad at it, right? They cannot risk admitting any kind of error. And I see that as a critical flaw in authoritarian systems. And I believe fully that democratic systems are far better because of this reason. But no government is immune from perhaps seeing advice as criticism, and that could occur here. But getting that advice is built into democratic government. And we have to remember that. It's for a reason. Our small d democratic systems are set up to provide accountability. And that accountability sometimes comes through elections or petitioning our government, say through making public comment, as we recently heard. But this Ethics Advisory Board is a way as well. With a focus on the specific and essential conduct of government, we can help our government recognize problems and address them. We as a community cannot learn and do better otherwise. So it's really important what we're doing here today, or starting to do here today. I would say it's a strength and part of the genius of democracy that we're not just allowed to do this, but we're encouraged to do it and directed to do it by our government, to look hard at our own conduct and render an opinion. With all that said, again, thank you for being here as citizens, and thanks for letting me talk for a little bit. I promise I won't be so wordy in the future, but I wanted to lay the groundwork there. Let's proceed to business. And our first item is our third item on the agenda is determination that the allegations constitute an ethics question. And I assume all of you have had a chance to review the letter report that was provided to us. Yes? Yeah. And if you break it down, there's essentially 8 questions. Some of them have subparts, but I believe we have a preliminary question for ourselves of whether there is an ethics question here in any of those 8 questions that it is appropriate for us as a body to address. And I welcome comment. I'll stop talking for a moment. We can proceed to a vote. Whether we believe that there is an ethics issue, at least one for us to address and go forward on. Again, I don't want to do all the talking here, but I would offer my opinion that having read the 8 questions and the subparts, I believe there are questions for us to address that do relate to the ethics code of the city of Ithaca. Does anybody feel otherwise? Katie?
I was just going to go ahead and say that I echo your statement that there's at least one, possibly several more ethics questions raised in the documentation provided to us.
Okay. Does anybody disagree? Okay. And you're welcome to. Okay. I would appreciate us taking a formal vote on it. So we put that in the record and I would call the roll. I'll just go in order. Brian?
Do we want to do this by motion or do we just want to do it this way?
Why don't we take a motion? Sure.
So I'll motion that we do this, that
there are ethics
that
questions.
there's allegations of sufficiency that give us jurisdiction.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Gretchen, seconds. Any further discussion? Okay. Let's call the roll. Brian?
Yes.
Gretchen?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Sharon? You're on mute.
Yes.
The perils of the pandemic. Everybody's on mute. Okay. But then, oh, yes, yes. Okay. In regard to the complaint we received, I had a second question, and this may go to Paul to give us advice. There was a transcript of a podcast that was done by voice recognition, and I found the voice recognition was not as accurate as I thought it could have been because some of the words and syntax didn't make sense. I did find that there is access to the actual tape. I did not listen to it because I didn't want to review it unless we had considered it. Should we allow ourselves access to the actual tape so we can see or listen to the actual words that were spoken in that interview? Any comments, questions on that?
Yeah, this was my question earlier about how formal the administrative process is going to be. Are we going to develop an administrative record? Are we going to admit different pieces of documentation into the record formally? If we are, that's probably the process that we should follow.
We can create whatever process we choose. We have some latitude. I would say that there's some benefit in us actually being able to hear the words spoken, so we're not trying to guess what was said there, particularly in the highlighted portion that's fairly short, but relevant to what we're looking at.
I would just suggest, does council have any recommendation for us on that?
I'll pull your mic.
Yeah, my recommendation would be as long as you're going to have the investigation go forward, I'm a firm believer more information is better than less information. as long as everybody shares in what information is received to form their own opinions. If you're going to have an audio, it may be a good idea to have a stenographer who will certify the transcript, provide a transcript for you, but you should have a copy of the transcript and each member ought to have a copy of the audio recording.
Yeah, that was my question. I mean, there's a wide latitude in administrative proceedings. How much evidence, whether you're going to do interrogatories, if you're going to follow pretty closely a legal process, something close to trial. I mean, so I participated in administrative proceedings fairly regularly at the state level. And there's a wide variety of how they approach this. But so I'm not taking out a position on this. I'm just saying, getting a recommendation on how complete an administrative record we want to have, and if we want to introduce these things formally, there's a process for introducing different pieces of evidence that you were suggesting that we should have a procedure for doing that.
Okay. Well, perhaps we adjourn this or delay this question until we get to item 5 on the agenda, where we're talking about review of the process, but we can revisit it there if you wish.
Sure.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah, I'd like to have something that's more universal than in sort of an ad hoc, we're taking this and not taking that, and so on. It'll be easier to explain to people how.
Yeah, I put it here because it's essentially the initial complaint that we have in front of us. So it's not really discovery, it's just clarification of what's received, but we can deal with it there too. And we could talk about this second question I have in process, but I think we can also talk about it here. We have the complaint in front of us. Do we wish to make it public? And if so, when would we want to do that? Has anybody put any thinking into that or have any opinion? Now, I would offer that in the interest of transparency and letting the public know what we're doing, making it public has some real benefit. On the other hand, these are allegations. They're not yet known to the public other than in what they might have read in the newspaper or gleaned from other sources. Is it appropriate to put them out by themselves? Certainly, the complaint will be subject to a FOIL request at some point, or could be, and would become public through that method. Any thoughts?
Rich?
Yeah.
I think at some point it should be made public, but I guess my thought is we should probably figure out exactly the process that we're going to use before we do make anything public. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Does that make sense to everybody else? Right. I'm thinking that we probably will be receiving other information from other interested parties, depending on how we set up our process. And it might make sense to have all of the information disclosed to the public at the same time.
My question is, and this is with the advice of counsel, it'll be subject to FOIL now that we've opened this process, it's probably subject to FOIL now. And so
somebody could get it now if they request it.
Right.
It's just what we would do as the Ethics Advisory Board.
Okay, well, I would really wait for us to develop a process. We can certainly go perform as the FOIL process suggests. And with that as a separate item, I don't think that should necessarily determine how we handle documents as within the process.
Okay. All right, well, we'll revisit it in number 5 on our agenda. We're building some drama here. Okay. Why don't we proceed to item 4 on our agenda? Determination that the Tompkins County Ethics Advisory Board has the authority to act. And following our precedent recently established, could I get a motion on suggesting we have authority to conduct our review or we don't have our authority? Would somebody move that?
I make a motion to proceed that we do have the authority to act.
Okay,
I'll second.
and Brian seconds. Thank you. And certainly a pretty plain reading of the County Ethics Advisory Board Code of Ethics suggests that we do have authority. We have an officer of a municipality that has made a request in writing to us for a review of the city code of ethics, and the city does not have a sitting ethics advisory board. So, does anybody have any contrary position? Why don't we again, for the record, take a vote on this, and I'll just go through the room. Brian?
Yes.
Gretchen?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. I do have another question. As I read the 8 items before us, the 8 items in the complaint, 2 of them, questions 5 and 6, would appear to cover issues regarding the county. And I would suggest that we should consider a review of those 2 items, not just for the city, but also under the county code of ethics. Or at least we should make that decision. I'll give you a moment to look at 5 and 6 if you wish.
Can you?
All right, advice from council is that we don't talk about the substance of 5 and 6, but we refer to them as 5 and 6 for now. Gretchen?
I just have a question. So we were sent this packet of 60 pages. Where's the official list that you're referring to?
What I did is I pulled out, there's numbered questions before the complainant signed the letter.
Can you tell me what the page number of the packet that you're looking at?
It's page 2 and 3.
Okay, there's something at the end that looks like an official complaint as well, so I wasn't sure which.
Yeah. 5 and 6 refer to both conduct of the city and the county together. And of course, the reimagining public safety process has been conducted with the city and county in collaboration. So I believe these questions go to areas where the city and county were working in concert.
And your question is whether we should consider the county code of ethics as well as city.
I think we need to consider a parallel question of do we have authority to consider the county code of ethics? And again, this seems like a fairly obvious question to ask because that's who we are. And we've been requested to look at county conduct. So it seems like the answer is yes, but I'd like us to do that formally. Or if we decide we don't have authority, we should put that on the record why we wouldn't.
Okay.
So what's the thinking on it? Anybody want to jump in?
I don't think we can automatically count out the county code of ethics without studying that issue. I think that's something that maybe we should seek advice of counsel on that issue.
I think it's well within your purview and the authority that's been given to you. My personal opinion is it would give more credence to whatever your final conclusion is, as long as you look at both the city and the county. If you exclude consideration of the county, it may have a potential impact or apparent impact on whatever opinion you reach for the city. So I think while you're collecting evidence and information on everything, you should ought to discharge the duties involving the county at the same time.
Yeah, that's my thinking, that we talked about transparency. I mean, it's hard to be transparent when we say we're not going to look at the county's involvement here.
Correct. That's my view as well, but, okay. Does anybody have any contrary thoughts on that? Again, could I get a motion to say that we have authority to look at those questions that make allegations regarding the county code of ethics?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Brian. Do I have a second?
I second.
Katie seconds. Thank you. All right. Any further questions or comments on that? Why don't we put our vote on the record? Brian?
Yes.
Gretchen?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. Now the review of the process, and we have some subcategories there. Number 5, determination of interested parties, if any. We certainly are going to be looking at issues regarding the city of Ithaca. That could lead us to the conclusion that the city is an interested party. Again, if that makes sense to everybody. And I think there's certainly city administration, but there may be other common council members, officials, or employees of the city that may be interested parties as well. How would we like to proceed on that? And maybe we need advice of council on who should be allowed to submit information to us.
So I would just before that, I don't know, interested parties is defined in different ways in different statutes. I'm most familiar with the environmental law, but where you have to have a direct legal interest, in the matter that it impacts some part of your, institution or whatever. And that's different than involved parties who are interested, but they may only have ministerial acts relevant to this. So I think the group of interested parties might be relatively small. So yes, advice of counsel would be appreciated.
Let me just step back. I would recommend at least the initial portion of what you're doing is we follow a procedure akin to what the attorney grievance committees follow and the Office of Professional Medical Conduct follow. Starting with the use of interested, we can use involved, interested. I don't think we have to give it a legal significance as we go forward. There are certainly a number of individuals and entities which have been named or involved in at least a complaint. I would suggest as a first portion that the board sends a letter to each one of them with a copy of the complaint and request them to provide their comments, information within 30 days. You can change the dates if you want to make it 45. Receive all that information. Once you receive that information, of course, share it with the complainant to allow their comments. And I think once you receive all that information, it may define the issues in your investigation. And that way you are not buttonholed into a lockstep procedure that may or may not be applicable once you receive that information. But at least by allowing them the opportunity to submit information, you're going to gain more information and determine what you want to do with that. Once you receive that, you can ask for more information from each one of them, ask additional questions. I think that gives you more of a broad scope in your ability to look at the issues and determine what additional information you're going to need.
Yeah, I think it's important to define it as a legal interest. I mean, a lot of people are interested. We have press here. There's a lot of people in the city that are interested, but not to the extent that they would be actually a party.
Yeah, when I use the word interested, I think I'm the same understanding as you are. I'm not suggesting that we invite public comment on this at this point, only because I think that may be seen as influencing the decision. But certainly the individuals that are listed in the complaint should have an opportunity, if they want to respond and provide you with information and whatever documentation they may have.
Certainly my view is that if somebody is named in the complaint, they should have an opportunity to defend themselves. So I would look to a fairly broad reading of who's an interested party. But again, there's 5 of us, so we should make sure we're comfortable with how we're proceeding. Gretchen, did you have something?
Just, I agree with that. That's what I was going to suggest we start with as well. Just go with who's named in this,
Yeah.
in all of this.
Certainly the people or entities who are named, I came up with the City of Ithaca as an obvious party. Yeah. Okay.
You go to I would suggest, because we haven't made a complaint public yet.
Yeah.
And given the nature of the allegations, and again, I will preface this by saying I'm coming from a perspective with the attorney grievance committees, the Office of Professional Medical Conduct. Before we make these allegations public, which one would have an effect of maybe, depending on how you come to your conclusion, impugning character of somebody. I would suggest that you discuss in executive session which individuals initially or entities that we're going to send a letter to inviting them to provide a response.
Okay.
That's okay with you.
And maybe it makes sense, if, again, I'd rather us not use executive session more than we need to. But at the end of our meeting today, perhaps we could go into executive session and decide who's an interested party. But making the public statement now that if somebody's mentioned in the complaint and an allegation involves them, they should be given an opportunity to respond. Right, but we can certainly address that specifically later. But the cat is out of the bag. The city is an interested party, and I think the county is as well, since we've discussed that. But we'll leave the other parties. Thank you for the advice. Till the end of our meeting, then.
I support a broad reading of interested. I've been on the wrong side of that one many times. So I appreciate, involving more rather than less.
And remember, you can have an initial list. This list can expand as you go forward. There's nothing limiting you to the time in which you have to accomplish this or the number of individuals that you can request information from.
Yeah. With that said, I'd like us to proceed apace. I don't want us doing this for a very, very long time, but we want to be thorough, so we have to make a balance there. Okay, so we will come back to that issue at the conclusion of our meeting in executive session. Another question I had is, do we wish to make specific information requests? And we certainly can make a general request for information or an opportunity to comment, but we may want to ask for specific items. And I do note that this committee actually, or this advisory board actually has subpoena power. We would need a vote of the legislature to issue a subpoena. I would certainly rather not use subpoenas, but it gives you some sense that we could compel people to come here and testify or to provide books and records. So we have the ability to ask questions and to actually get answers if we so chose. I think proceeding on a voluntary basis is preferable, but it's out there. So I think where we probably want to go is to ask our council to do a preliminary set of specific questions that may be relevant to what we need to know. And we review that individually by email, and we will all have an opportunity to add questions or to ask questions about the questions. And if we deem that there are specific requests we wish to make, we send those out as well. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Paul?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so we will give that direction to our council, and we'll proceed from there. Let's see. And then 5C on our agenda. I have handed out a piece of paper and I sent it by email to Katie and Sharon. This is a draft I prepared and I provided it to Kathy Covert, so it will be part of the record, but it is purely a draft. And this was I use this to try to help me understand how we could proceed through this process. And I realize you just got it, so I don't want to say that we need to decide on this, because it certainly could be subject to amendment and improvement. But it is one way we could proceed, and I don't know if you guys want a moment to look at it.
Just received this and it being fairly detailed. It would be good probably if we had the opportunity to review it and send comments to the board and then have a discussion at the subsequent meeting.
And Kathy, do the members all have email for John and Paul?
I'm not sure if they do, but we can send that information out.
If you send a question to our council, please copy all your other board members so that we.
Just so you're clear, if I receive an email from one person, I'm going to reply to all persons.
Well, I think I'm not sure that we would do that direct. I think we should probably work with the chair to the council. Otherwise, it gets a little confusing.
You can certainly do that, but
I think we should probably agree to do that so that, I mean, he's got billable hours and, we could be really loading him up with a lot of nonsense and probably not good for the county's budget.
I would be happy to act as the conduit. What I don't want to be seen as a obstruction. If you want to talk to council, you're allowed to just copy everybody, but I agree with you. The better process would be to go through.
I just want everyone to understand, for the members who aren't attorneys, so I am the attorney for the board, not any individual member. Any information you provide to me, I have to share with everybody else who's on the board. So just with that understanding, I want to make sure everybody understands before you send something to me, what my duties and obligations are.
Okay. So I would ask you to take some time and look through this draft. Again, feel free to make comment on it and improvements, as I said, but if you could then respond, say it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. And again, this is only a draft, but it'll be available to the public so you can see at least my thinking on that. And then, were there other questions that we delayed? Oh, we were going to talk about the recording in terms of process. The getting access to the recording.
I would like access to the recording. I think if it's being presented, we need something accurate.
I agree, but okay. Is everybody comfortable with that? All right. All right. We will get that, the same version of the podcast. I think there's only one, but we'll send that out to everybody so you can at least listen to that section that has the highlighted language on it. And you can certainly listen to the whole thing if you wish. Okay, and we determined about making the complaint public, and we would do that when we receive responses. In the draft process that you have, we are giving the complainant an opportunity to respond with further information if they so chose. Would we want to make things public when that rebuttal, that response is received, or when we have the full response from the other interested parties? Any thoughts?
Well, I think we should have this complete a record. I mean, there's always the possibility there'll be back and forth long into the future about who said what, when, and what it meant. But at least we have one round of opportunities to respond. And so that, and that should be sufficient, I think, before we release it.
And of course, somebody could issue a FOIL request and get access earlier, but we can't control that.
Imagine you might get a FOIL request.
Well, it's, I'm not disclosing any great secret here. I think. Okay. Anything further on process? Any questions? Anything we missed? Okay. Kathy.
Rich, I do have a question.
Yeah.
If someone does submit a FOIL request, will we be aware of that?
We certainly can be made aware of that. Yes. Would you want to be made aware? Do you want to be not aware?
I don't know. I mean, this is all new to me, so I'm just trying to understand how this is, how typically this sort of thing will play out. I'm surprised nobody has filed one yet, given that it's already been in the news, but
Well, we haven't convened and accepted the complaint until now, today. So today is the day that it's now before us.
I see. Okay.
It's become a county record at this point. I mean, it's in the county file, so it's foilable.
Okay.
Yeah. And certainly if, we can always decide along the way that there's information we do want to make public. We can amend our procedure to, address what we see as necessary issues along the way. But for now, I think we have a process that we will not actively disclose information until we give the interested parties a chance to respond and the complainant a chance to respond further. Okay, all right. Any other business on agenda item 5? Kathy?
I'd just like to let the committee know that we do live stream these meetings. This is a public meeting through our YouTube channel. And we also offer this meeting right now by Zoom. The executive order for virtual meetings does expire June 14th, I believe. The county is in the process of passing a local law to allow the continuation of that. But the Ethics Advisory Board does fall under the open meetings law, and the county's local law would apply to this meeting group. So.
And Kathy, my understanding is that under the rules that we will adopt, if that local law is passed, you can appear under an emergency by Zoom, but you can't vote.
No, you can vote, but the individual is not counted towards quorum.
Okay, we need 3 for quorum, but 4 to take action.
That's correct.
Certainly, as far as possible, we need to make sure we schedule with the greatest chance that all 5 of us can be here. And going forward, probably we want to try to do in person, but we need Sharon to get through COVID. So we will get there, hopefully. Anything further, Kathy?
That's it, thanks.
Okay. I do see item 6, minutes approval from our June 29th, 2021 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes of our last meeting?
I might want to alert people that are here for the other issue that this may take longer than it appears. There's a number of old business items in the minutes that I would like to discuss either while we're going through the minutes or afterwards.
No, let's do it now.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's something about some language that I will bring up later, but I'd ask about executive board training, and I mean, ethics advisory board training. And, I thought that we were going to reach out to the state controller and find out if they had any suggestions. Similarly, I would like to reach out to see if they have any recommendations on our financial aid forms or financial disclosure forms. Because when I did the editing like 5 or 6 years ago for this ethics advisory code, there were different kinds of questions being asked around the state, and there may be things that we might want to ask. And So then, the other thing I asked about was, the bylaws issue, and it was about to be taken up like a couple of weeks after our meeting a year ago. I don't know, all of the advisory committees I've been on, 3 or 4 of them, they all were required to have bylaws, and we don't have bylaws. And I don't know whether it's necessary for us to have bylaws, but I thought that was another question we could ask the state controller of if other EABs have bylaws or not. And I don't know how the county discussion about bylaws worked out, because I know that the legislature wanted all of the boards that I was on to have bylaws, and they were planning to have us create more uniform bylaws for all the different advisory committees.
Okay. I do note in the minutes that our then attorney, county attorney, commented that he didn't think that we would get resources from New York State on training. I don't know if he followed up on that or not, but we could certainly re-ask the question. So I agree with that. And just for the record, by the way, when we received this current complaint, I reached out to New York State, the JCOPE, the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, and I was hoping to find out if there was a best practices document on how to conduct an investigation. I was put on hold, did not speak to anybody. I called back, they said they were at lunch. I called again, I was hung up on, and I called later and was informed that they are very busy. And somebody would get back to me when it was appropriate for them to do so. I failed, I gave up. I have lots of criticisms of JCOPE and how it's running its ethics issues with regard to state government, but I can tell you I was not overly impressed with their assistance to local government.
Let me just comment on that also. I had the same sort of problems with the state ethics folks. I'm in a proceeding now where there was a requirement to pursue a conflict of interest and recusal, and the person got outraged that it was even raised, and so they weren't too interested in discussing what the ethics requirements were, and they were clearly not following the ethics procedures required by the state. And I think this is a problem. We've had this for 20, 30 years, whatever. It's not being resolved. I think we're doing a much better job at the local level. And we have the comptroller telling us that we should do this thing and that thing. And we do that and we follow it. The state level is a whole nother issue.
I think there's some work to do there. I agree with you. But at any rate, I did make an effort to try to get some assistance from New York State, and it fell flat. As to bylaws, my understanding, and Kathy, you can advise me on this, that our bylaws are essentially the code of ethics.
Correct.
It's called the code of ethics, but it really does have all of the information there on how we're supposed to operate, and like the quorum requirements and voting requirements and meetings. I don't know what we would put in bylaws. I guess we could call it code of ethics and bylaws, but if there's a real sense on the board that we need separate bylaws, we could do that. But I think it's in substance all there.
Yeah, I wasn't advocating for, I was just saying that what makes us different than the other advisory committees and why we aren't complying with the legislature's request that all advisory committees have bylaws.
Yeah, I did serve on the Government Operations Committee of the county legislature, and I cared deeply about bylaws, but now I'm not on that committee anymore, and I've totally forgotten what we're doing, but we were trying to consolidate and make consistent bylaws across advisory boards, which I think is a really good thing. I just don't know where that stands at present. And to some extent, I anticipate that the code of ethics for us is going to be a little bit different.
I just had a couple of other things that, I think there was a statement in the minutes that maybe was written. but I'm not sure that we want to have it appear as it does.
What page?
Well, I don't have that right here, but it was, the statement was from Jonathan that said the comptroller was more concerned in the forms being completed, at the disclosure forms, than the accuracy of the content. You know, and you know, if we have only one set of minutes a year and that's what they review, that's not going to look particularly good. Did you find it?
Yes, it's on packet page 2, so first page of the minutes. That does seem to be an unfortunate. Well, it's unfortunate. On the other hand, I think that is perhaps what he might have said. My memory is somewhat dim, but I think that's what he said.
Yeah, he probably did. So, okay, well, we'll leave it there and see what happens.
We live with what we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I'm done with it. I have another couple of questions after we approve the minutes.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
but they're short, so I won't. They're too long.
Gretchen.
Minor typo. H2, the paragraph right above other action item at the end of the second line refers to me as Mr. Rymarchak, but the rest are correct. The rest of the references are correct.
Okay.
And then the other question I had, so then following that, it looks like Mr. John suggested an edit to the code of ethics. And I am not recalling the last time I got a copy of the code, and I think we've updated it a couple times. I just want to make sure I've got the most recent copy, given the matter before us today. So could we get a new, so everybody get the freshest, most recent? Thank you so much.
Check 1 second whether that made its way into the section 1 meetings. Can't find it.
Oh, physical copy. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That change did make it in. Advisory board members should contact the chair of the legislature in the event that the ethics advisory board chair fails to call a meeting. So, yeah.
So do I have an agreement that we write a very brief letter to the state controller asking those questions about the ethics advisory board training and about financial disclosure forms?
I think that would be fine if that's the will of the advisory board. No harm in asking.
You know, since we meet so irregularly, I guess we're going to be meeting more often, but, you know, generally it goes for a long period of time and then the question is raised again, and then it would be good to just resolve those two issues.
Okay. And Kathy, I'd ask if I could get your assistance, we'll put a letter together and we'll send it out. Okay. And I do note that we have parallel business. We need to meet to consider review of the financial disclosure forms.
Right.
We were considering doing that today, but because of our agenda and focus on this issue, we said we'll reschedule for that purpose. But we should do that relatively soon and get that out of the way.
Yeah, I had a suggestion about how to report better. I mean, we generally had Jonathan just say, I looked at them and they're all fine. We don't have any record of that other than the minutes. I mean, we have a list of people that are required to file the financial disclosure forms. It would be good if we had a checklist and we had it followed by a statement that I have reviewed all of these. I've received all of them. I've reviewed them, and there's no particular problems. And that's signed and that's just kept in the records. But because we have a document of someone that did review it and is certifying that they reviewed it and that they did not find any problems, it would be good probably if we had both Kathy, who's been doing some of this, or whoever the staff person is, and the county attorney do that. Is that something, Kathy, you think is doable?
I think so. I can work with Bill Troy on that.
Yeah, it would be good to have some record that we've actually, because we don't see them. It would be good if we just actually received that document
I agree. I agree. That's a good idea.
Okay, with that, I would motion that we approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
There we are. With the change to your reference to your name. Okay. I'll call the roll. Brian?
Yes.
Gretchen?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the minutes are approved.
So I have one other question that I'd like to, since the comptroller criticized this in the past for the county attorney not reporting to the board that he was a private attorney for a county affiliated organization, Mega. I'm just wondering if Mr. Troy is now the private attorney for Mega, and if we can put that on the record.
I believe he is not.
Okay.
I would note that I believe Mr. Troy is still teaching a trial advocacy course at the law school, but other than that, I don't think he has any outside affiliation.
Well, it's when the state comptroller comes, they, interview folks and often find out information about the people working with it we don't know, which would be helpful if we do those kind of things.
And not to render a personal opinion, but I don't see any conflict in what Jonathan Wood was doing in representing Mega. This is the Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance or something. It was a cooperative to band together to buy in bulk power for municipalities, and it was very successful in getting affordable rates for all the municipalities. So I don't know that there was any substantive issue, but
I mean, I think not to assert that there was anything improper about it. It just probably
question
the
came up.
potential conflict that should have been revealed to the board.
certainly. Yeah. Okay. And then it does appear that we have more work to do. And so the next item on our agenda does come alive. It is needed, schedule a next meeting. Do we want to try to schedule that now, anticipating that we are going to solicit information from interested parties and we want to give them a certain amount of time to respond? I think that would entail us making a decision on how many days we wish to give so that we would give them an opportunity to provide a response. We could then schedule our meeting after that deadline has passed. We'd also want a certain amount of time to review whatever is turned into us. That probably is pushing the meeting towards at least the end of July or the back end of July, depending how much time we allocate. I would like to make sure we're proceeding on a reasonably quick pace here. And I would think that the involved parties could respond relatively quickly. I would be inclined to go with 20 days, but it could be 30, it could be, council said 45.
I would just advocate for trying to expedite this process. I mean, it's the summer, people may be on vacation the week that you ask them, but the shorter end is better. I think we heard a comment from the public speaker here that said, this may have some impact on decisions that are being made. And I would hate to negatively impact that if we need not do so.
So I would throw out 20 days in that spirit. What's the sense of the board?
I don't have a sense of what's reasonable to request. I think if they can't do it, they feel strongly about it, they'll let us know and ask an extension, I guess.
Certainly we could consider an extension if somebody needed time. Yes.
This is Katie. I think 20 calendar days is more than reasonable.
Sharon, what do you think?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Given that I think discovery in New York State courts is 20 days, I think that would be appropriate. And if they need more time, they'll ask for it. And, hopefully we'll get everything within 30 days and then we can, take a certain period of time to review it and be able to meet. fairly quickly.
Okay, so it does sound like there's a consensus for 20 days. If somebody needs an extension, they could certainly make that request. And our council, in sending out the invitation to respond to the interested parties, can make that clear that if they do need more time, they can request it. With that said, 20 days from today, we are the 7th. We need a few days to send it out. So,
Remember to make you draft
right.
questions. The committee has to look at that. They have whatever
Okay.
questions they want. So
Let's plan on, we could send it out by the end of next week. Is that
I
reasonable?
can drafts out for it. Yeah.
Okay. Which would mean if we could turn it around, let me pull out my calendar. I'm trying to guess as the dates, sorry. Okay, so the 17th is the end of next week. If we could send out the request for information the week of the 20th. 20 days from then would be around July 10th. We'd certainly want a cushion. I would suggest that.
But remember, we're going to give the complainant an opportunity to respond.
Right. We can do a shorter time period for that, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say 10 days, which would, and then we want a little cushion in there. Throwing out a date, Friday, the 29th. And does 11 o'clock work?
Yes.
That's July 29th, correct?
Yes. Does that work for the legislature, Kathy?
I think so, yes.
How did that work? First guess. We're leading a charmed life. All right, so tentatively, we will schedule our next in-person meeting for July 29th at 11 o'clock.
Here in Chambers.
Here in Chambers, yes. And we will then be subject to the new rules that should be in effect.
Yes, yes.
Depending on how we vote tonight. I guess it could all be voted down, but, okay.
So included with this draft letter will be the names of the people that we're going to send them to, right?
We're going to go into executive session next and consider that.
All right. I was just saying that we could at the time also then add other suggestions, but yeah, that's probably better to do it now than later.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one quick question
Yeah, go
before we
ahead, Katie.
adjourn. Will the meeting on the 29th also include the discussion of the financial disclosures, or would that be a separate meeting?
I think we should probably try to do that and get it done. It shouldn't take too long, but we should get that out of the way.
Okay.
Kathy, what do you think?
To do that on the 29th?
Yeah,
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, actually, technically it's late. We're supposed to do it before July 1st, but we've done it later before, so I don't think they'll hold our feet to the fire for being a month late.
Right. And just a procedural item I would bring up, which is that we would likely be receiving replies from interested parties on a random basis as they come in. I would suggest they be turned over to us as received, so we have as much time as possible to look at them. You know, we could wait and collect them as a big packet, but I think better for us to have them in real time. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. And then I think we've worked through our agenda other than the item for executive session. Is there any other business that we want to take care of that we should be doing in open meeting? I would say that once we go into executive session, we do not anticipate coming out and taking any further action. All right, could I get a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
Rich, you need to state the purpose.
the purpose is to discuss who might be interested parties as named in the complaint we have received that is not yet public. Right. And we have a motion and second. We ready to vote on that? Brian?
Yes.
Gretchen?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, so we'll take a minute to,
We
Go
need-
up.
Yes, we need
Go
a
up.
couple minutes to shut down.
so we'll recess and then we'll come back in executive session. Thanks, everybody who attended on YouTube.